I see this and I can see clearly how this is going to change the way we do things. So I made that decision at that point. I'm going to learn everything I can about this. And I've developed a relatively successful career. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to learn everything I can about this and see where it goes. 9 months later, I co-authored that first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs. 3 months after that, I quit my job to go full time. And so far, I haven't gone back. I've jumped out of the plane and the parachute came out, at least so far.
They may have told you to go to the big city, chase the busy crowds, find the bright lights. But no, you chose your own path to stay right here. I'm your host, Claire Bouvier. Welcome to the Small Town Entrepreneur Podcast, where opportunity is just on the other side of the door. Today, we have the incredible trailblazer of our generation. Meet Steve Kaczynski. He's the co-author of the Everything Token and the visionary force behind Starbucks Odyssey. Let's dive into a world where innovation meets impact, guided by one of the leading minds in today's tech revolution. I'm telling you, you're going to want to listen. Steve is full of energy, full of life, and is going to share the unforgettable journey into the future, a true architect of change. All right, we have Steve. Steve, you are the co-author of the Token of Everything. Are we NFT Bark? Are we Steve Bark? What are we calling you today on the pod?
We'll go with Steve Kaczynski. That's actually my birth name. And yes, author of the Everything Token, co-authored the first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs, worked with Starbucks on Starbucks Odyssey as the community lead for their NFT program, working with a brand called Doodles, which is a native Web3 brand, on some consulting there, and, just host a show. And really, I just want to get these ideas out there so people understand what this tech is.
And I'm so excited. I don't know if you can tell, but I know the listeners know that this is my jam. I will never pretend, but I am a total nerd, and every moment, like you, always learning about how this is changing our world. And that's what your book is about. And huge congratulations. It's one thing to talk about writing a book. A lot of people talk the talk, but you're living proof. You are writing on a topic that is also huge. We're in another bull run, and it's crazy what's happening in the world. And you not only wrote on a book that's so topical, so relevant, going to change our world, but you executed, and it's out in the world. Not only that, but it's fantastic. I was just telling you before this, I was in Austin, Texas, and you made me look really cool. I was at a Web3 meetup for women, and I threw out the book there, said, hey, no big deal getting Steve on the pod. So I am so grateful you're here. So Steve, let's imagine our listener has never opened up Twitter and they are not familiar with Web3 and they haven't heard of the term Web3. What would you tell them? How would you explain Web3?
So I'll go a couple of places with this one. I think, people are maybe not familiar with the terms, but think of it this way. The internet has existed in 3 phases. Web 1 was what we call read, where you would be able to go on and you would be able to sort of read what people wrote. In fact, in the mid-90s, when I was in middle school, I was coding web pages so that people could read them, because I thought it was cool that I could make a website when I was in 7th and 8th grade and somebody in Paris, France could read the same thing I coded into existence. That was read, right? Like you could read the news and interact, but really, maybe you could start to buy things in e-commerce. Phase 2 of the internet was write. Think of that as the social web. So Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, you're able to write, interact, have two-way interaction like you never would before. But, as the phrase goes, if you're not paying for the product, oftentimes you are the product. And as we know, in Web 1, you were the consumer and bought stuff. In Web 2, you were the product because they took your information and sold it. Web 3, you are part of the brand. And by that, I mean you own. So it's read, write, and own. In fact, there's a tremendous book by a guy named Chris Dixon who actually wrote a nice quote for our book called Read, Write, Own, which kind of explains this extremely well. So the idea is back when you could, with the early internet into the social web and now into ownership, where you can actually have ownership of the internet. And if you want, I could get into what that means actually more implicitly with some really good analogies that we've really worked out with our editor for this book, who was non-crypto native. So she was able to make sure everything kind of hit.
I love that. So let's do that right now so that we really set a strong, because it's one thing you're like, okay, read, write, own. Well, hopefully by the end of this episode, people are like, okay, well, I'm ready to be part of the ownership phase of this world. What does that look like? Give us an analogy so that we can start getting our audience excited participating in this.
Yeah, well, like the nerdy part up front is you can't have markets without property rights. And that sounds really jargony, but it's the same idea that if I wanted to sell you my house, I have to prove through the deed of registry that I own my house to sell it to you, right? And the analogy I like to use, my friend Adam Hollander, I call it the Hollander Explanation. It is my favorite explanation of what Web3 is, which is imagine you go to a museum and you see a beautiful painting on the wall. You can take a picture of that painting, but the picture on your phone is not worth anything. You could buy a print in the gift shop, but that print's not worth anything either. The reason the one on the wall is worth so much money is because the museum owns it, it's the original, and they can prove both of those things. And up until recently, it was nearly impossible to prove the ownership of digital items. Now, this may not seem like a big deal, but because they're digital items, I'm sure we'll get into many use cases, you can build on top of them, right? It's programmable software. It's not just I own this picture. Because I've had people say, well, I could right click and save a picture and then I have it too, right? And my answer to that is a couple fold. Number one, you could take a picture of somebody's Ferrari, but you don't own and drive that Ferrari, right? Similarly, I could make my profile picture on Twitter or Instagram or anywhere else, Shaquille O'Neal, but that doesn't mean they're going to put me in the Basketball Hall of Fame or give me all his endorsement checks from all the commercials he does, right? That's just not how it works. So you can right click and save pictures from the internet, but the actual provable ownership of that, which is more than just showing you on the picture, which is defined by something called the blockchain, which is just a fancy registry, just like your registry of deeds or anything else. Well, that means that you can program all sorts of fun businesses around it. And, the reason why we called the book The Everything Token is, when we started thinking about the businesses and industries it can potentially disrupt, we kind of started saying, well, it's medical records, it's ticketing, it's music, it's entertainment. It's kind of everything. So we can certainly get into those to make them even more crystallized. But I think that analogy helps explain you can now own things digitally, and that has the ability to change markets across the globe.
And I really like what you said there, and I love your friend. Shout out to the Hollander.
Adam
Like,
Hollander, yeah.
like I love that because I think that's the thing. We get really caught up in the jargon and the words like blockchain and stuff. But when it comes down to something that we know, like buying a house, looking at art, I think it makes it really it really relates to us, especially as we're moving into a whole new generation that, I mean, we had this conversation. My 1.5-year-old, I can't say that I sit and teach him, but it's wild his interactivity on a device already. And you're like, how? And the world we're going to be experiencing is going to be very part of this. Now, your background is in marketing. You've done a lot of, and this is a natural progression. What was the moment that you were like, this is our future?
Yeah, it's funny. I have been early. I mentioned Web 1, Web 2, Web 3. I have been early to every one of those stages. And in each one, I had people tell me it was ridiculous and I didn't do anything about it. So in Web 1, I had teachers and adults say, this is an awesome hobby. We love that you're into tech, but what's the purpose of these websites? When I was early to Facebook and I connected with friends and thought, this is pretty cool. I'm seeing people that I haven't seen since middle school when I was making those websites are adding me as friends. Or when on Twitter, people who are my age can remember a plane landed on the Hudson River in the United States at one point. And when that happened, the first reports and pictures came from Twitter. And I was like, oh, this is a real-time news update to connect with people.
Wow.
And then I was early to Ethereum. In fact, my poor team, when I was at an insurance company in a leadership position, when I was there, I would whiteboard why I thought Ethereum was cool because of smart contracts in 2018. And again, people said, crypto's a big scam. This isn't particularly interesting. And I believed them. And when the market went down, I didn't follow it. So come 2021, I started getting into this world and found these sort of NFTs. And when I looked up what it was, I was like, wait a minute. This is a thing through the smart contracts built on the thing, the cryptocurrency that I got into in 2018, built on the thing, the internet that I was obsessed with in the mid 90s. And I see this and I can see clearly how this is going to change the way we do things. And so I made that decision at that point. I'm going to learn everything I can about this. And I've, developed a relatively successful career. I was leading, internal communications at a Fortune 500 company when we sent, 40,000 people home for COVID, right? Like, so I built up into a successful PR and marketing career. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to learn everything I can about this and see where it goes. 9 months later, I co-authored that first Harvard Business Review article about NFTs. 3 months after that, I quit my job to go full time. And so far, I haven't gone back. I've, jumped out of the plane and the parachute came out, at least so far.
uh, it's crazy because we talk about early adopters. What's the word before the early adopter? You're the early adopter. And how many of your friends are hitting you up now saying, "Oh, if only I had listened to you."
Oh my God. That is like the conversation where I remember, when I was getting into NFTs and people were like, I don't get it. It's silly. I don't get it. And then as time went on, it went from I don't get it to how do I learn more about this thing, which has been really nice. Like telling your friends and family that you're working in this new tech industry is really, really hard. And, it's like you feel like you see this thing that nobody else can
Yeah.
see. And I saw it so, clear enough to spend the last 2 years writing a book. And so, the fact that that happened and then going through that with my friends and family, it's been actually really cool to come out the other side. A couple of years ago, before my dad passed away, he made a comment to me where he said, "Look, I don't understand, anything about what you do, but I'm proud of you because you're actually chasing your dream and trying to make it happen." And that meant a lot because it was that moment where he was like, "I can't explain what you do at all, but I do understand that it's important to you, and I understand that you're kind of onto something here." So far, so good.
That is what better gift could he have given you, right? Yeah, that's really special. And because of that, Steve, and this is where I find people like you to be very interesting because some people like you don't always get the credit. And when I say don't get the credit, you do get the credit, but it's way down the road and people are like, "Oh, right. Yeah, like I knew you were onto that." But would you say like it's interesting. I meet a lot of people and some people are like, how did you know that?" You talk to other people like, what was the pieces that came together? Can you speak to those all these early phases, these it's patterns and behaviors of humans, right? It's psychology. So you're recognizing demands and needs. Was there anything over the each iteration, the read, write, own, the web 1, 2, 3? Was there anything that always stood out to you that you noticed that we're ready for a new transition in most in even in a local situation or something more global?
It's funny. In each instance, I always find myself having like an aha moment. And it's like I can remember clearly. Like I can remember the cackle of the internet when I connected because it went through the phone line in the mid 90s and all those things. And I
Yeah.
remember like that moment, like I said, where I was like coding a website and like could send it to my friends. But not only that, like people all over the world and in different places. And at the time, people who had maybe moved away from my school who I could tell who could get on the internet in their computer lab in their school if they didn't have a computer at home or computer. There's a Nate Bargatze skit where Nate Bargatze, one of my favorite comedians, was like, people are like, "Well, what about your computer?" He's like, "Well, when I was a kid, because he's around my age, it's like you have a computer. What are you, a gazillionaire?" And it was like, so I remember like the moment of like people seeing it elsewhere, being this click moment for me and being like, okay, there's something here. Similarly, to like my friend adding me on Facebook from middle school or the plane landing on the Hudson River. And I think to me, there's
Yeah.
no secret anecdote. I think everybody has these in their life, right? Like I think certain people can spot trends in business that I could never spot, right? And everywhere I've worked, when I worked at Nestle, right? Like Nestle USA, and we're working
Yeah.
on DiGiorno, Hot Pockets, Lean Cuisine, all these big brands. There are people who are in the sort of distribution and supply chain who could see things coming down I would never go because they were
Wow.
just trained to see the trend. And I think for me, I'm just built in to be a nerd who loves tech and video games. It is just my DNA. And as a result, I'll see something and I'll say, I'm onto something. And the other thing is like, I think I have this mindset where I have this desire, this intellectual curiosity to learn, right? And
Right.
I think that, like, for whatever reason, the way I'm wired is I want to try things. And look, some things are going to be like I was on Daily Photo, which people don't know what that is. It predated Instagram. It didn't work. But then I was also on Instagram early. I was one of the first people
Yeah.
to get to Pinterest, right? I had to get an invite code that got me a special invite, right? And some of these work out to things, but Friendster and MySpace aren't still here, but Facebook and, AOL's gone, but Facebook is here. And I think I've always just been an early adopter who wants to try the new thing. And I think because of that, I'm able to be the ultimate beta tester and spot what's good, what's not, and figure it out from there.
And I think that's what it is. And you know something else, you're a risk taker too. Like you recognize there's opportunity, like you said, there's opportunity for things just to kind of fizzle and go on, but there's always the next thing. Help me out here, but I would say there are a lot of people fearful of Web3 or this idea. They don't even maybe know it's Web3, but this whole NFT, this whole movement of decentralization that we talk about. In your opinion, what would you say? Why do you think people are hesitant to embrace it? And on the flip side, why is it inevitable?
Okay, so this is a great question, and it actually people have short memories. So I think people forget that.
I'm one of those people.
Well, and truthfully, like I think people forget, like you can go back and find videos from the 90s of people going to like it's a great. You could Google this video. You talk about taking action. Google the
Yes.
video about credit cards in the 90s at Burger King, and there is a video of people using credit cards at Burger King and people saying, "I would never not use cash. What is this thing? It's slow. It's terrible." There are people who would say, I'm old enough to know that I used to have to bring a check to a store to pay my credit card bill. Now we do all of our banking online because you would never do your banking online, right? And think about what that is, right? We're talking on a Zoom video call. This morning, I did a show with 1,000 to 2,000 people that I do every Monday through Friday that, that are listeners all through my phone. 20 years ago, I had a Motorola flip phone. And so when you think of these stories, or like even before that, a Nokia 8260. And when you think of these stories about like what these are, one of my favorite one to put it all together, there was a McKinsey cell phone study. So McKinsey is one of the top consulting firms, right? And AT&T in 1980 said, we want to know how many people are using cell phones in the year 2000 so that we can prepare for it. McKinsey came up with the number and their estimate was 900,000. And they said that based on the weight of the cell phone, the technology that existed at the time.
900,000.
Who would even use such a thing? I believe the number was closer to 110 million. So they were off by just a smidge, right?
That's actually hilarious.
Well, and think about that. That's before the iPhone in 2006. So that means that many people were already using cell phone to the tune of 110 plus million. And when you think about it, it makes sense because people look at technology the way it is now. They're fearful of what's next. They don't see the purpose. And again, I would say to anybody, I'm sure your listeners, like you mentioned the NFT skepticism. I will tell you now kind of to why they're inevitable. Number one, they are simply just better software. And businesses will always use better software solutions for their businesses and can have them advantaging their consumers as well, right? Like QR codes were a trend, but then you use them for every ticket you have now. Now, I think NFTs, much like the term MP3, will eventually be dropped. People aren't going to say NFT. You don't they say MP3, you listen to music. You don't say, let me go to the game and grab my QR code. You say, let me get my ticket to go to the game or the theater.
Love that. Love that. That was like a question I've been dying to ask because I think just that, the way we choose our words can impact even our actions and how it's implied.
Well, they've been financialized, right? And to be fair, like early, there was a .com boom. Amazon almost went bust, right? Yeah. Apple had to be bailed out by Microsoft at some point when Bill Gates bailed out Steve Jobs. And this is how the world works sometimes, right? Does that mean that those industries were wrong or incorrect? Does it mean because there was a .com boom, they're overly financialized? Not necessarily, but I think that people need to pay attention to that. You need to separate the signal from the noise. And even with the digital items, because one of the questions I get commonly from people, particularly around my age, is I don't want a digital thing. I want a physical thing. Why would I want something digital? And my answer usually is I look around that room, maybe it's a large company, I say, all right, show of hands, how many of your kids play Roblox, Minecraft, or Fortnite? All the hands go up, right? If they have kids. It's like, okay, well, did they pay for those items? Like, kids care about digital items right now. And again, when you think about the advancement of technology, I think we have short memories. When I was a kid, and I was, I loved video games. But when you saw an adult playing a video game in the wild, it was either Tetris or Dr. Mario, because if you saw an adult playing a video game in the wild, it was like seeing a unicorn, right?
Hey, I'm still playing Tetris, okay?
Which Tetris is electric. I will say I was the best Tetris player on the TI-85 calculator ever to exist. But like the thing that's funny about the video games is like I play Halo with my brother. My friends play Fortnite and Call of Duty. They're in their 40s. People in their because we aged into it. Our kids will age into caring about digital collectibles. My daughter has bought physical items specifically because there were digital items that came as a companion in Roblox. And so
Yeah.
understanding that,
Yeah.
and also like people who own like signed memorabilia, nobody sees it. But if you have that somehow pinned to a digital item that you can display across your profiles online, well, that's an opportunity right there for you to show the things that you own and flex your identity elsewhere. So I think there's going to be that digital growth. And I think businesses are well advantaged to think about how it fits into their business purpose and, integrate it as the software and the infrastructure and rails around it advance.
And I think that's huge. We're growing into it. It's this natural progression, just like anything. And it's true. We do have short memories. Oh my gosh, you're this is like so much nostalgia because, and I think Steve, you can relate. Where I grew up. This is the small town entrepreneurs. Like I grew up, there was dial up until I went to university. Like it was like we were really so I know this world of just building forts in the forest most of my life. And then all of a sudden I'm coding in HTML my first English lit paper at university. And it just like you're like, okay, this is awesome. And it's moving fast and we can see things are moving faster and faster. What are some like Web3 examples that we can see today, every day, that's people are using?
Well, let me toss to you because I think like one of the ways to bring value is to toss like ways they could work for people. Because here's the truth. The truth of the matter is right now, just like the internet, it's funny. You could look up and find articles that say, and again, you can Google internet passing fad and you'll find an article that says internet is a passing fad as millions give up on it because people thought tech and cost barriers were difficult, right? Like you had to
Yeah.
have modems, you had to connect to the phone line, all those things.
Mining is expensive and
All of those things. So like when you look at like
environmental. Yeah.
what Web3 is doing now, like right now, like I mentioned, I built websites in the 90s. And when I had a code of line off, it meant that the entire website was brick to code, right? When my sister got a phone call, I got kicked off. I got kicked offline because it was the internet,
No,
right?
and you can hear their call.
And yeah, so this is how it was. Now, if you and me want to spin up a web page, we could just grab a Squarespace and do it tonight, right?
Or even not even. This is the other thing. Sorry, we're totally
Oh, no,
nerding out here for a
let's do
second.
it.
Web 10, you say the website you want it to look like, you put in something, it literally builds out you in a website and you don't lift your finger.
And and think about those tools that didn't exist, right? As the early internet was forming. Well,
Yeah.
very similar right now, you have to be pretty close to the rails to use Web3 and NFTs. The reason why actually we wrote this book specifically is because, it's a 5.5 hour listen on Audible at regular speed, right? So not that long. And
I
if
love
you're,
that you said regular speed.
well, it's funny. I had to really, I mean, you
Your
can tell
speed,
talking
you
to
talk
me.
fast.
Yeah. Someone once described me. It was hilarious. I was doing an interview and they're like, you are articulate and talk like a machine gun. Is a fun description.
No, I
No,
love that.
it's like the reason why we actually wrote the book, and this is not me shilling the book, it's just the truth is like we know that this technology is coming, and I didn't have the advantage of having any tool. Like there was no Google for me to learn about HTML. And so we
No.
want to give a tool where it's like if you're a small business owner, because we believe this is as important for the Starbucks or the local coffee shop.
Love
And
it,
the
love it, love it, love it.
the majority of businesses are small businesses and they should be getting the advantage early on. So for us, we're like, look, read about it,
Yeah.
understand what this stuff is. And then even if you can't execute it now, once those tools come into play, you're ready to pounce and you can work on your strategy in advance. So like an example I like to give
Yeah.
to people is access pass or ticketing, right? Like, right now you get a ticket, you use it at the game, you throw it away.
Yeah.
NFTs providing digital ownership are a strictly better solution for this specifically because it helps stop counterfeit, right? Like, there's only one and it goes one person to the next. But what's cool about NFTs is they are programmable software, meaning if you're a local business, let's say that you are by a stadium, let's say you're by the Toronto Raptors, arena, and you're across the street from it. Well, you want to be the official Toronto Raptors bar. Well, once the technology is there, you could say, if somebody has season tickets, they can come here, prove it with their NFT, which will then just be called a ticket or season tickets, and you can get a special area. So suddenly you become that thing, right? If you want to give, extra benefits on top of it as a small business, you're able to do that. Or if the team just says, we want to issue every person who's here the opportunity to get a free t-shirt, right? Like,
Yeah.
they can do that by knowing everybody was at that game and can get their right sizing and things like that. Or the person can sell their ticket to someone who wants that free t-shirt. So building on top of things like that, if Lin-Manuel Miranda wants to say, I want everyone who went to Hamilton to get to cut the line, which you can think about how big this is for artists like Taylor Swift, who's,
Yeah.
their ticket drops get absolutely botted. She could say, no, we have an NFT for my true fans, and they get in first, and they can get the tickets so they can go to the show and maybe get extra benefits on top of it. So the ability to build on top of it and
Yeah.
create a community and a sense of
Yeah.
identity around it, that's where the magic happens.
You're good at what you do. People in your town know it. But imagine if the entire country did. Picture people all around the world knowing what you did. I use Kajabi, and it isn't just another website builder. It is the one-stop shop for me. It's a launch pad for your experience, whether it's courses, memberships, community, email marketing, sales funnels, landing page, website, and more, and all in one place. With no tech, no headaches, your knowledge is the product. Kajabi just delivers. Stop fiddling with all the plugins and start sharing your awesome today. Use my link, clairebouvier.com/tools, and in the show notes. You know what? It got me. Oh, this is so fun, Steve, because I'm like, I am all about so things that have always bothered me. And you're always like, how come this hasn't been fixed? But I think this is so exciting. Do you remember in high school or college or whatever? I remember getting a card and it was 15% off at this store and 20% off at this store. And I always thought, and who else didn't think this? But I was like, how have we not figured out the one-stop shop? You get this code or we say code, whatever it is. It's just something that recognizes, you flash it, and there's that community that you've got that card, but allows you into all these places, things accessibly. So this is kind of what you're talking about, where these businesses can use it. And, main streets of small town communities and stuff, we could have these one pieces of identity that kind of bring a community, leveraging a community, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's the part. See, the part that excites me. Look, we talked about the ownership. So just to give a little bit of a teaser in the book, we have this thing called the NFT Staircase, which are the elements based on our academic research. And by the way, my co-author, big brain, Harvard Business School professor, researcher for one of the top crypto venture firms in the world. He's brilliant. I still don't know why he hangs out with me, but I'll take it. But
eventually you'll figure out you're cool, Steve.
the NFT Staircase, it's we broke it down to the following elements. Ownership, which we've explained. That's table stakes, right? Utility, which I've talked a little bit about, right? If you issue an NFT, maybe you say as a business, by owning this NFT, you get to vote on the next flavor of donut we put out. Maybe you say you get to attend our parties, whatever that is. Then we have
both of those.
Oh yeah. Oh, we have a small example like that where it's simple as that. Vote on the donut. You actually can infallibly vote, and then you can use that as an entry ticket, and then you could still use that same flexible asset as a discount card, right? To your point. So that one asset can be all those things. But the rest of the staircase goes identity, community, and evolution. And notice identity and community are 40% of the staircase, because owning an NFT is an act of sort of identity in and of itself. But think about it this way. If you rent a house, you're probably not upgrading the kitchen. You're probably not putting a pool in the backyard. You're probably not fencing it in because you leave. But if you own that house, you probably are upgrading the, countertops. You're probably doing those things. You get to enjoy them. It increases the resale value, and it brings that value into it. So if you own an NFT, say, as a membership to a local boutique, my wife loves shopping local. She shops local boutiques nonstop. And, she has certain community about it, but how do you connect with other people in that community? Through a Facebook Live is the only time you do it. Maybe you see them at a party that you go to. But imagine if you had one connecting asset that you could use to access a digital space together. You could trade the best deals there. You could get to know each other. And in fact, in the Starbucks Odyssey community, as an example, the top 20 members of Starbucks Odyssey got a paid trip to Costa Rica to go to the coffee roastery or coffee farm they have there. They were allowed to each bring one guest. There are people who are bringing plus ones they have never met in their life because they met them through that community. Think about that for any brand. So if you have a local business and you want to connect, you may create best friends within your very own community. And in fact, my co-author and I have not met in person to this day even though we wrote a 250-page book together, because we met through an NFT community. We had a shared sense of identity around it. We met in a community space. We talked, and we ended up writing a book together. So that can happen
That
for a small
is
business.
really cool.
Isn't it?
Wow. Well, it's so amazing you're saying this because some of my really close, I call them friends, I've met on the internet and I've worked with them on projects. I agree. It's like, I went for a walk this morning with my neighbor. Like, I need that, that person to person. But I agree. That is so powerful to show that you built something so beautiful and amazing for this world. And you did it through these communities that you're talking about.
Well, and I can even give you there's so many small business examples once this thing gets up and running that I think are phenomenal.
Shoot
So
out some, shoot, fire, like rapid fire some of these. This is great.
rapid
This is
fire.
great.
So when I
Yeah.
was a kid, I got
Yeah.
a big coupon book that we used to do at school. We used to say buy this coupon book for $25. Nobody used the coupons. Nobody patronized the businesses except occasionally. And we'd be like, oh yeah, we have that thing for this local business. Well, again, you could decide that you want to have
Groupon on steroids.
think about it this way. If you have one Cleveland-based NFT or Columbus, Ohio-based NFT or Toronto-based NFT or you name it, right?
Yeah.
You basically can say, let's get together as a small business, do this thing together, and this gets certain deals that you can program. And because it's an NFT, you could say, this week it's going to be 20% off. Next week it's going to be 30% off. Next week it's a free entree or appetizer. You can test around, but it can be a connected thing where you and the business next door can say, hey, while you're here, if you buy this NFT or you own it or you give it to someone, you can just give it to someone for free so they patronize your business. Don't forget to stop next door at my friend's shop because you get 20% off over there. So that's an example of one where they can work together under the same sort of thing and they can change the programming. And it's not just bringing a coupon or remembering to do something or taking a number down to be part of their membership program. So that's one example. And you could even do this where you could say, hey, let's work with the people 2 cities over so we can get cross-city tourism. So we can say somebody 2 cities over can come to ours and we'll give them a deal and they'll give us a deal. And so you can program these things. And people might say, and just to make one quick other analogy, people will say, well, we can do that now, but it requires a cocktail of complex softwares that you're duct taping together. The NFT being...
Steve, can you say that again for our listeners? Because I think focusing on that is the ultimate reason why, if it's not broken, why fix it, right? Why change it? Why? And I think this is what it is people like you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. But there is a more powerful way to connect the community because a lot of these things aren't happening because of the heavy lifting, the financial investments, the building of softwares, the permissions and this and that. Can you really, this is something so powerful. Let's stick, I want to go Toronto, Ohio. Can we do Toronto and Cleveland?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do Toronto, Cleveland. This is why I love people like you. Let's walk it through. What does this look like? Because one of the questions I really wanted to ask you, how do you dip your toes into? So let's say tomorrow, you and me, we are starting one street in our favorite street in our hometown or town that you're in. How would we build that?
Well,
step one.
The step one, this is what I'll say.
That's the hardest part.
It's incredibly difficult. And I'm just going to be transparent about that. And that's why we want people to get educated on it right now, because the out-of-box solutions for the local businesses aren't there. That said, once you're able to issue that, and you can issue that as simple as something called a proof of attendance protocol or a POAP, which is a just simple NFT you get for showing up somewhere. You could even program against something like that. So we could issue one in Cleveland and one in Toronto for going to a business. And then you just do sort of the jersey swap where you say, hey, somebody in Toronto, if you own this NFT from this local Toronto business, we in Cleveland are going to give you this incredible deal on this thing. And then they can do the same and you could have it open for a period of time. The city tourism departments likely could work on saying, hey, we want to do this city swap to encourage people to visit the other cities over the summer. Toronto is beautiful in the summer. Cleveland is beautiful in the summer. So it's, hey, let's do it in July and say we could do this sort of swap thing.
Okay, can I stop there? Because this is a big question and I love this walkthrough. The biggest thing is, well, I've heard this. Well, how do they know? How does it know it's going to honor that or it knows what it comes with? How do I know if I take this leap of faith. I'm in Toronto. I go to Cleveland. I go into the shop. How is it going to recognize it? What would
Yeah,
you say?
and that's where the actual back end technology, the nerdy stuff comes into play, which, without getting deep into it, just think of it as they can prove beyond the shadow of a doubt the same way that my license is sort of a crude way of saying I am me.
Yeah.
The NFT is sort of a more sophisticated way of saying, yes, I absolutely provably own this. There are softwares that are being built as we speak, like something called token proof right now, that a
Yeah.
friend of mine has started, who lives in actually Austin, Texas, where you show up to an event, they scan a QR code, it looks into your digital wallet, which is where you store these collectibles, and then those collectibles say, you definitely own this thing, you get the deal. Now, how it's disseminated can be so many different ways, right? But like, the information that's disseminated could come through a, gated online community where they let you know that. It could go through if you have your email associated with it. People are associating emails and information with it. But that idea of building in utility and having it proved is through that blockchain, which is basically a way of saying it's nearly 99.9% impossible to hack most of these decentralized blockchains because of the way the technology is built. It's something which we haven't had before. And that technology, but the truth is, what I've found is most people don't actually, I tell this to my friends in crypto all the time. Nobody cares that like our Zoom meeting is working. We care that it works. We don't care if it's on Amazon Web Services or Azure or whatever. We care that we're talking over the internet. So I don't know. To me, like that's the
Yeah.
truth of the matter there.
Yeah. No, and I think that's okay. So listeners, stay tuned for the Cleveland, Toronto. Well, I'm in Kingston, so we'll do Kingston. But I love this because another plug, and it's so important. Again, if you're just jumping in the episode, the everything token. You are like you're hearing this from the early adopter, and he knows what's happening. So jump in, read the book, educate yourself. Now, how do you think it's going to change our relationships with customers and building business loyalty? Because I think ultimately, as small businesses, I was working with a succession planner and we were chatting on an episode, and this idea that in 5 years from now, and I'm really interested, is that 75 of businesses are really going to be exiting because of they've been in business a long time. This is now the end of, they want to go on to do things. Some will sell, some will dissolve, whatever it is. How is this next phase, this Web3, how is it going to continue to build the loyalty of our communities and relationships with our customers?
Oh, so much. It's going to make it so your customers can become the best decentralized marketing arm you ever had. Because by issuing them some sort of thing that they're able to own, right?
Yeah.
Then to use the local donut shop example, right? So let's say that, again, you have this donut shop NFT, from a donut shop who's issuing a new flavor. And they say, we want you to vote in the new flavor. You use that NFT to get one vote per NFT you own. Well, you're probably going to talk about that a little bit because you have this social currency of saying, I help vote on this donut and I have ownership of it, right? Then you're going to maybe go to the opening to get a free one because your donut won and everybody else gets it 50% off who voted for another donut, and you can bring a +1. Now you have the ability to go to that. But let's say you're out of town and can't make the donut party. Well, they've dropped you a ticket. You can give that ticket to someone else to go to that donut party. So, as a business, you are giving some level of direct ownership to your customers, and to them, that makes them more invested in the brand, to make that house analogy again. So, for many people, they feel directly connected on the outcomes of the brand. And as a business, one of the things that we've noticed across NFT brands early on is that evolution step is something that is really, really powerful. So, you might, right now when businesses are trying to get answers, they might ask a couple customers, they might do a focus group. But
Right.
when you have somebody who owns something and is genuinely interested in your business, they want to see you succeed because they
Yeah.
own that NFT, and the value of that NFT is higher based on your success. They're invested in it, right? To some degree, right? It's not an investor. It's not a financial, it's a asset they own, but the better you do, the better they do.
Yeah.
So for them, it's like they're going to go out of their way to talk about your business, to, try to improve your business. And as a evolution phase, they're like a focus group that will give you the answers to the question without you ever having to ask them. They'll tell you what to ask and they'll give you the answer, and you'll be able to iterate quicker because they're not just some customer who's upset and yelling at you. There's somebody who loves your business, who owns something in your business and wants to see it improve.
The critical feedback is to improve it. Now, would you say for those people that are really familiar, because when we're talking about this, I think this is why I've had a lot of friends, including my brother, like big into crowdsourcing, the crowdfunding space. Would that have been some sort of why it was so powerful? Because, you are part of, like, if something is being put out, whether it's a new product or service, they're buying in knowing that they have in some form participation in the evolution of it. Ownership is different in Web3 though.
Absolutely. That's absolutely something you can
Yeah.
do. And you can do it in a variety of ways, right? But the other thing that is cool about this symbiotic relationship, to use the bigger example, let's use the Taylor Swift example because
Yeah.
I'm a Swiftie. I love
You're
T Swift, so I'll put it out there.
you're getting more cool points by the minute of this episode, Steve. So, if they haven't heard anything, they heard you're a Swiftie. This is great.
Oh, I mean, my flex goes back to, I remember, when Tim McGraw came out and, she was 16 and, that was her first single and listening to that in the car. So I can flex on my daughter with
Again,
that
you're
one.
no.
But like Taylor Swift, she actually went through an incredible battle with record companies, right? Because they, how those two-way relationships go. And in fact, when I was growing up, also a fan of the Backstreet Boys, they were making like $100,000 a year when they were the biggest band in the world because of their manager.
That's
Imagine
so sad.
Imagine a world where Taylor Swift, as she's coming up 16, playing honky tonks with her parents, is able to say, I'm going to issue, 20,000 NFTs for $500 each. And with these NFTs, you will get access to my concerts and whatever, right? You might buy one in support. Then as she becomes the biggest act in the world, and suddenly that gets you gated access to buy tickets, maybe access to buy exclusive merchandise, maybe the opportunity to go to meet and greets or virtual meet and greets. What do you think happens to the value of those NFTs? They go up. And then what happens every time it's sold? Well, it's software, so she gets a royalty every time it's sold.
Yeah.
So Taylor Swift is motivated to add value back to the NFTs. The Swifties are motivated to get the NFTs and utilize the utility or eventually sell them to someone who wants that utility. And so, there's a million ways that the brand can interact with this, but you can imagine where a local business maybe has a small run on my wife just got this green sweatshirt from a local business here. So much so that like, she got the flex. We went to one of my kids' soccer games and it was like a green like sweatshirt. And someone was like, I know where that's from. Those were rare. And so she got the flex, right? But if that small business had a small run of those and their NFT holders got first crack at them, let's say that they dropped them another NFT that says you could claim this sweatshirt. Well, my wife could decide, I want this sweatshirt because I want to represent the brand, or I want to sell this to someone else for $100. Well, that local business could get $5 of that $100 sale that my wife had. My wife gets $95. All it is the right to buy the shirt, right? So
Right.
they're going to make the sale. They're going to get the hands of someone else. They're going to get a secondary royalty. And this relationship is very cyclical where you can decide the things you want to participate in, the things you don't. And by tokenizing it and putting that aspect to it, you can make royalty money as well as get your people excited about it and talking about your brand. It's like people already represent identity. Like, think about how many people have like standing in front of the Disney Magic Kingdom castle as their profile picture on Facebook, right? That's just a form of digital identity of a community. Imagine if you connect all those Disney moms and dads, also big Disney fan, by the way, Disney moms and dads together in a digital space. Like you could create those friendships and those opportunities, and then they're going to spin off other things and like proliferate your brand to other people. So the opportunities are endless, whether you're a small business or a big one.
And I love this because now this is going to be a two-parter episode because we're going. I had a few questions and I'm like, oh my gosh. Okay, Steve, I'm going to ask you. The elephant in the room here, though. And correct me if I'm wrong. I will be very embarrassed, but hey, this is live. Why isn't Taylor Swift doing this? If this is the biggest thing, and she's a marketing genius, I will give her that. Her music, hey, I might not make. I was an okay listener. Not gonna lie, but I think she's a genius marketer. I will give her a genius. Why is she not doing this?
I think right now there's some challenges with the market design and the infrastructure. And when you are that big, you need to figure out the best way to issue it. So like part of the problem is putting the genie back in the bottle. Taylor Swift is one of like a few acts, like the Post Malones of the world, the Ed Sheerans of the world, who sell out arenas, stadiums, outdoor stadiums, right? Luke Combs, like people like that, right? Who are selling out massive, massive venues. How do you find those true fans now? How do you determine that those true fans are really your fans versus the ones that are maybe the people who want to just get it, gouge it on the secondary market? How do you issue those? So I think the challenge is, I think we get there with most artists, but it's got to start almost small. The most elegant way is starting small, because if you see a local band at your local like hole in the wall and they're issuing NFTs and you buy it to support them, and then they become, I remember seeing, a band from my childhood, Sugar Ray, play at like a small little
They're from Cleveland?
What's up?
Where are they from?
Well, no, they were touring. I don't remember where they're from.
Yeah.
But they were touring and they were in like this
I
little
love
backyard.
Sugar Ray.
Oh man, I saw them before their major album dropped. 1459 was one of their big albums. I saw them when the Fly album was going, and they played this tiny, tiny like venue called like the Agora, which is like a small few hundred person venue, right?
Sugar Ray, I'm gonna listen to them right after this. So thank you.
Oh, they got so many. They just put out banger after banger. But like Sugar Ray, like I saw them small. If I had bought a Sugar Ray NFT and then they're selling out arenas, like it's like that would have been the ideal, because I was a big enough fan to go to that small thing. So to me, the reason why a lot of like bands aren't doing this is because the challenge is people who are incredibly savvy about the software, incredibly savvy about the information, might front run. And then you have the same problem you have now of gouging on the secondary market, or at least one level. So if I'm Taylor Swift, I'm trying to think of the most thoughtful way. Now, I don't know what that is. Is it creating online communities? Is it finding those people that way and having them connect and then identifying them through some historical thing? I think it requires a tremendous amount of work to suss out sort of the pretenders from the contenders and the signal from the noise. So that would be my inclination.
That's a brilliant response. I actually didn't think like that. You want to start this small. Okay, our listeners today, as we're wrapping up the episode, I really think this episode is, I'm like so excited. I'm like, after this, like, what am I gonna build next? And I too, like, it's all about community, building the community around products and services and building that connection. There's someone listening right now and they're like, okay, this is all like, I'm amped up, I'm excited, but really at the end of the day, we want people to take action and start building this. What do they do? Truly, like, is there a Web3 agency that they need to reach out to? Because if the tech is something that already, they don't have those skills, and that's the reality of a lot of businesses that have been traditionally running. And I know that that's the barrier. We have talked about that, is that first step. But what would you say to these listeners?
I would say this is what I said early on in the internet as well, back when David Letterman like was joking with Bill Gates that the internet was that the radio and a tape recorder were a acceptable current technology to the internet. I would say the same thing to people, which is get online. I would tell people get online and try it. So my answer is, if I could make two recommendations, shamelessly, our book, The Everything Token, and
that was gonna be me too. Don't worry, that's coming. It's like, that's a no-brainer. The Everything Token. Buy, download, listen to Audible. Are you the voiceover?
Yes, yeah, I'm one of two. I had to slow down a lot, but yeah, we did it. We made it work. Me and my co-author.
I haven't listened to it, so this is good. I have the book, but I'm excited now. I'm gonna get the Audible.
There will be a familiar voice right off the rip, and then Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon is a phenomenal primer. So that'll kind of get you up to speed. So in those, in less than 12 hours, you could have your entire knowledge scope right there. Thing number two, what I would say, explore. Look, if you want to be early and take advantage of this, it's like anything else. Somebody who's an explorer has to taste the berries on the bush to see if they're poison. So if I'm you, I am setting up a wallet on, various platforms, which is going to be a little more level of complexity. That's your like 202 stuff versus the books are going to be your 101, 102 stuff. Yeah. Set up wallets on the various blockchains and start playing around. You don't have to buy things that are super expensive. You don't have to spend a ton of money, but understand how it works in the dynamics, because, just that small amount of knowledge will position you infinitely in front of people. Because I have an inclination based on, we talked a little bit before we were on about AI and how much that can affect the future of how things are built. Like someone could code a website without having to like put the code in because you can just ask
Yeah.
ChatGPT and various platforms for it. So
Yeah.
my answer would be, this stuff's going to get here quicker than people realize. And if you want to be the early of the late adopters, or
Not the
still considered
early. You're the early's gone by Steve.
yeah, the medium adopters, read the books and then start toying around. And in fact, I'll just tell one quick story because it was like the most heartwarming story for me that gives me the chills.
Yes,
Is
I love stories.
I did a podcast with someone before the book came out, okay? And it was set to come out after the book came out. And I got a bunch of hardcover copies before the book came out. Like, it was the coolest moment. It was like getting to hold it in my hand. And the person who I was doing the podcast with was like, he's in his 40s like me. And he said, look, my dad is super tech savvy. He plays chess with me on the Oculus, but he just doesn't get NFTs. He's like, and I've been in NFTs for 3 years and I love them. I was like, well, how about this? Book's not out yet. Let me send him a signed copy of the book and just shoot it his way, and maybe he'll read it and see what he thinks. And he's like, my dad will be open to that. He loves reading. Got a message from him a few weeks later. He said, let me send you the following text message from my dad. First text message. I'm 9 pages in, and I'm finally starting to understand what this Web3 thing is you've been telling me about. 2 chapters in, I've set up a wallet. 4 chapters in, I bought my first NFT. Now, when you think about how connected people are to their NFTs, I have created a bond. Me and my co-author have somehow managed to fortify a bond between a father and a son. And to me, that's the quintessential, like, forget the numbers, forget the bestseller on Amazon and all that stuff, which was awesome. Don't get me wrong.
I love you're getting that. And I'm like, you got a wallet?
That's what it is, though. This is why we wrote this book. So people who are listening to this can say, I can read this. I can get this. I can understand this. And when that time comes, they're going to be ready to strike. And here's what I'll leave it on. You want to be learning about this stuff because the last thing you want to do is be Blockbuster when Netflix and streaming come along.
Boom. Sorry. I'm a musician and I got the theatrics fun.
Ooh, what do you play?
I'm a fiddle player. Violinist.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
30 years.
I'm
just flipped my garage into a studio and I was just out for a walk. This is actually crazy. This is fun. I don't know if we're going to air this, but maybe we'll. Why not? We're out walking and this girl that I was absolutely just loved, I saw at a really small festival. And this is why when we're talking about this, first of all, how can we turn this podcast episode into an NFT? First thought. Second thought was we were out walking and my girlfriend, she was in a band with Lowell. That's how you spell it. Lowell. And she's like, we're talking about my little son loves the Texas Hold'em Beyonce song that just came out. Fun fact, she's like, yeah, she wrote that song with Beyonce. And I'm like, wait, what? Like, trust me, this is like, and I'm like, hold on. Didn't know this. And I was like, okay, this is so crazy because we're in a small town. He's been a drummer. So anyways, long story short, we were like laughing because we're like, there's this connection where you're in a small town, but you can be connected to this big world because obviously the internet creating this. And now that we're talking about this, imagine with artists just starting up having, these NFTs that as you never know what can happen to the music, how it takes off. Maybe the Sugar Ray of NFTs. Anyways, just wild having this conversation. I am so excited to get more people so excited about this next movement. And like you said, it's moving so quickly. And I think, the term NFT is going to change. Is there any one piece of advice? Because we didn't really touch on it. And I think a lot of people, the whole tech seems daunting or, it seems like a scam because when everything blew up in flames, people have that hesitancy. What word of advice could you leave our audience today?
Just be intellectually curious and understand that technology moves really quickly and you have the opportunity right now. It is like an unprecedented opportunity to be early because I will say this, the access to being early, like we didn't even talk about like how significant, this can be for people in countries of unrest who are going to be able to like take their money and their teaching degrees and things to other countries instead of starting over, right? Which is like real, to me, that's the most poetic application, right? Like if you flee a country, like, I know I talked to someone who left Russia about 20 years ago, I believe it was, and they weren't allowed to bring any belongings. If your money and other things are on the blockchain, like, it's
Birth
everywhere and nowhere at the
certificates,
same time.
existence. Yes. Like, you know how, oh my gosh, had a conversation trying to get passports, birth certificates of people that died to get dual citizenship. Yes.
The identity aspects are huge. But like, I
Healthcare
guess,
and identity. Yeah.
oh, healthcare is a
Yeah.
massive one. That's another one. Like, but like, it's a whole lot of all wax. But like, my big thing is like, when Web 1 came along, there was a major financial and time barrier and access to
Yeah.
information barrier. When Web 2 came along, the same thing. Right now, we have the entire power of the world and the internet on a 6-inch screen in the palm of our hands. You can learn everything you want and need to, and you can find people who will educate you and talk to you like never before. So
Yeah.
my recommendation is be intellectually curious, and whether you're interested in this stuff or not, figure out if it is for you. You may read the book and say, not for me or not for me right now, but at least you know. And I think that
Yeah.
that's the big advice I'd give to people is like, use the power, like, it's more of an overarching thing even beyond Web3. Use the power that we are given with the internet for what it is intended for and make connections everywhere, because we've never been able to access people and information better than before. Just be intellectually curious to make it work for you. Because don't get me wrong, I love doom scrolling Instagram for hilarious memes and videos. But at the same time, there's so many powerful uses that you can have at this point. You can take Yale classes for free online.
I know.
Do it. Take your time to do it, and take the time to use it for all those to be intellectually curious, because there's a whole world out there that you now have in the palm of your hand.
Love it. Steve, you are awesome. You are truly the early adopter of, the future of communities, the way we buy, the way we sell. And this is really special that you were able to come on the pod with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And my last 90s reference on the way out the door, I'm sure you get it all the time. You look a bit like Christina Aguilera. Do you get that? Ever?
No.
Oh yeah. Now do you see it? Look at yourself.
I'm so no, I get Lady Gaga or Scarlett Johansson.
Oh, I can see those too. I can see those two. But like, I immediately jumped out at Christina Aguilera as soon as I was saying it. I was like, I should have used the example because you probably get that all the time.
No, this is awesome. Okay, this is fun. No, Polish both sides of the family, which by your last name.
Yeah, you got it. Yep.
Yes. Okay. I was like, yeah, immigrants from World War II. Yeah, crazy story. So go Poland. This is awesome. Thank you, Steve. And I'm so excited for the world to hear this. Cheers.
Thank you.